Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to welcome Hank Phillippi Ryan back to the podcast. Hank is a 5-time Agatha Award winner. She's also won the very prestigious Mary Higgins Clark Award. And as an investigative journalist, she's won 37 Emmys. And I asked Hank before we started recording, did she ever have a time off? So I'll ask you once again, do you ever have much time off? Do you do vacations at all, Hank?
That is a really interesting question, I have to say, because you really made me think about that answer. And I sort of cataloged in my mind, do I ever have a moment where I don't have anything due or don't have a deadline or don't have something required? And I have to say, I really don't. There's not really that moment. And so I try to look at the bright side of that. I try to think, well, the only thing worse than never having a free moment is having every moment free. Nobody wants me. Nobody cares about me. Nobody cares what I'm doing in any way. We don't want that. So I completely embrace the busyness. I completely embrace the responsibilities. I think I kind of thrive on it, actually. Don't you?
I do indeed. So I think my only downtime is either when I'm on an airplane where I may be writing or reading, or sitting on the couch reading and preparing for a podcast. But even though I don't consider that work because I love to read, it is still work related. So I'm not a person to lay around on the couch all day long watching television or lounge in the bed. When my eyes open, it's time to go. My day is starting. Let's make the most of it. So I totally agree.
One of my favorite places to write actually is on an airplane. You know, it's so compressed. You can't get off. You can't do the laundry. You can't go get the mail. You can't prepare dinner. You know, you're totally focused. You know exactly how long you have from point A to point B. And I love that sort of compressed instant little deadline where I flap up my laptop. I put up my barriers, my emotional barriers, like, don't talk to me. I'm working. I really get a lot done.
That's right. So the book is All This Could Be Yours, and it is out today. Will you give the audience an overview of what this new book is about?
This book is super meta and super personal. And anyone who is a reader or a writer or who has ever been on book tour will really connect with this. It's about Tessa Calloway. Tessa Calloway is a mom and a wife and a debut author with a surprise best-selling novel. It is such a blockbuster that she is sent by her publisher on a gorgeous, glamorous, whirlwind nationwide book tour, where she's greeted with adoring fans and standing ovations and people wanting her to sign their arms, every single thing that an author could ever want. But Tessa soon begins to realize that she's not alone on this book tour, that someone is following her, stalking her, and someone is bent on ruining her career. And not only that, but destroying the family that she left back home. And so what was supposed to be a glamorous book tour turns into a cross-country cat and mouse chase with the author running for her life.
So I travel a lot. Most people who know me personally know I travel. If I've got 10 cents over my lunch money, I'm ready to get on an airplane and go somewhere. And I do wonder sometimes going in and out of places, you look around at your surroundings unless you're an ostrich. And you have to see, sometimes I will see when I travel the same person repeatedly. It is something that's happened my whole life. And so I could feel for Tessa, because when you start realizing something is a little off, it's very off-putting. So you travel a lot as well. So I have to ask, is there any personal things in this that you included?
This whole book, Dan, is so personal. No one could have written this who hasn't been on book tour. But the thing that was so fascinating to me about it, this is sort of book tour weaponized. And it started when I was at Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, this sort of haven for all mystery lovers. And I signed a book that said, So great to see you in Scottsdale. And I put the date and signed it. And then I thought, well, wow, that just gave somebody an alibi. And I started thinking about all the things that we authors write in books and inscriptions and what they could mean if you looked at the dark side. Like, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for a wonderful evening. What could someone hold up that book and say to someone that meant? And as a result of that, Dan, every single thing that happened to me on book tour, I started thinking, well, what if that was a bad guy? What if that was somebody who wanted to harm me? What if that's somebody who knew one of my deepest, darkest secrets? I mean, everybody who's ever been at a book event knows that moment where the MC says, does anybody in the audience have any questions? And as an author, I will confess to you that moment, that little interstitial silence where people are thinking about what to ask, there are times when I thought, don't ask me that. You know?
Please don't go there.
Please don't go there. And Tessa, in All This Could Be Yours, one of the things that makes her so terrified and makes her fear so logical is that she thinks this, whatever it is that's happening to her, and clearly things are happening to her in every airport and every airplane in every city, she fears that it's actually her fault, that it is all the result of sort of a Faustian bargain, a deal with the devil that she made long ago, that she thought was a secret. And some of the things that are happening to her on book tour are indicating to her that maybe somebody knows that secret and is about to tell it in the most humiliating and destructive and public kind of way. So just from one signature, just from one autograph, this whole world opened up to me of sort of, how bad can book tour be? You know, how can I weaponize book tour? And I always tell my author friends, don't read this book until you're home, because it's going to creep you out along the way.
Well, it is Panera guy creeped me out right off the bat. I mean, and I knew exactly what you were going for, because I've actually been in hotels where you see the same person on your floor, and all of a sudden it's like every time I go to get on or off the elevator, there's that one person. I'm like, sometimes in life we just have a similar schedule and it's nothing more than that. However, if you get a bad vibe from somebody, all of a sudden it becomes something very, very different.
And that's exactly what I was playing into in All This Could Be Yours, because it might be just a coincidence. It might be that sometimes people are just unpleasant, or things just happen that you can't explain. And the other thing that's so urgent about it and so disturbing about it, if you think of it, is that every author on book tour has put their schedule on their website.
Right.
So I want you to know where I am. I want you to come see me. This is the whole goal of being on book tour. On the other hand, everybody knows exactly where I am, and everybody knows exactly when I'm going to be there, and everybody knows where I'm not. I'm not home if I'm in Des Moines.
That's it.
So this publicness, this openness can be weaponized, I keep using that word, into a real vulnerability, not only for the author, but for the family that she's left back home. I mean, in this case, in All This Could Be Yours, Tessa's husband, she and her husband and her two darling kids communicate by Facebook, by FaceTime, and by Zoom. And Tessa begins to realize that Zoom screen, that FaceTime screen only shows what her husband wants it to show. Tessa can't see what's going on off camera. And she begins to wonder whether people are keeping things from her. So she's trying to juggle. I mean, can you have it all? Can a mom and wife with a happy marriage and darling children who loves her family have another life as a successful, best-selling, world-traveling author? How do you do that? And what happens when those dominoes start to crash?
And Hank, one thing I'm reminded of, I see a lot of authors, I speak to a lot of authors, and the term imposter syndrome. I think certainly as a first-time author, more so than maybe a second time and a third time and a 14th time author, that imposter syndrome creeps in there, because you think, do I deserve this? Am I worthy? And then, of course, sadly for Tessa, she has secrets. And she has had these secrets have been magnified. And that part of Tessa's life gave me a lot of pause because you begin to examine. That's the great thing about the talent of some authors. They make the reader think. So, I began to examine things in maybe my childhood that were blown out of proportion by adults because of how they were dealing with it. Yet as a child, I only dealt with it as a child, because when you're 12 and 14 years old, you can't have the same reaction that a 30 or 40-year-old has. So talk a little bit about how that was important to this story for you.
Yes, that is so fascinating because it's all about the context of our lives. And that's what makes every book different. And that's what makes every author write in a different way, because they're drawing from their own experience, their own past, their own fears, their own dreams, their own hopes. One of the things about imposter syndrome in this novel is that Tessa loves her book. She's really proud of this book. She thinks she can write, and she's enjoying having readers fall in love with the book. But she does have this secret in her past. And she thinks nobody could find out about it. Her past is long past. Her name is different. Her life is different. It'd be very difficult to find her. But it's a doable thing. So I do think that one of the things that happens as a result of the pressures that we undergo as authors, I mean, you talk about, is it harder to do it the second time, or is it harder to do it the 16th time? It is harder and harder and harder. I think Tessa wants to love this. She expects that this is a dream come true. She's on a hashtag Moms with Dreams. And she is sort of the poster child for Moms with Dreams. And I wanted her to be that. I wanted her to be the proof that if you follow your dreams, you can succeed. And Tessa has succeeded, but is something in her past keeping that from her. She has the joy, as some authors do, if we're lucky, of feeling very connected with the main character in her book. Some authors call that the muse. Some authors call that, being in the writing zone when your character talks to you. Some, Sue Grafton used to call it the magic when Kinsey used to talk with her. That, all of us who are in writing world know the glory of having that voice in your head that your character talks to you. And Tessa's character, main character, Annabelle, really does talk to her. And I love that because, obviously, I mean, Annabelle is not a ghost. Annabelle is a character that Tessa has created. That's something that we embrace. And I loved playing with that as an author in All This Could Be Yours. What does that mean when an author has a character talk to them? Is that weird and bizarre? Is that scary? Or is that actually lovely and devoutly to be wished? And so I played with that as well.
So you mentioned a word that brought up something I wrote down. I made a note. So have you, as a writer, Hank, ever created a character that scared the toenails off of you? And would you use one that scared you or actually literally frightened you? I mean, have you ever created a character so deep that it scared you?
Sure. And I embrace that totally. I think it's wonderful. If I can, at the end of All This Could Be Yours, I absolutely actually cried. And as I'm sitting here at this very desk crying, I thought, well, great. It's so emotional and so personal that I can affect myself by it. That's what I'm going for at every minute of every day, is that I want readers to connect with not only with the main character, of course I do, and everybody loves Tessa. She's just great. But I want people to understand and relate to her journey, her dreams, her goals, her super fears, her disappointments, her regret for what she may have done in the past, and the search for the answers about what she was told versus what is really true. And I have to tell you that I don't know the endings of my books before I write them. So this was as well.
Well, I will say, Hank, that I really love the way you unpacked that, because the readers, get to go along with you on that journey, the same journey that Tessa's going on. Of course, we want Tessa to succeed. That's what you want your protagonist to do. But yet at the same time, I was really, really struck by how things that we're told how things went. Because, sometimes even with friends, you just having a regular everyday conversation and a friend recounts a story that you were involved in, and you may remember the story differently than your friend, just because that's human nature. The one thing that shocks or thrills me might not be the same thing that shocks or thrills you. So I loved that part of this, because it was such a human feeling that every single person can relate to, that it is just something, because we all remember things differently. But there again, when we're children, if the adults who tell us a story don't follow that through with some kind of explanation as we're getting older, it leaves scars that we'll carry with us our entire life.
Because what is truth? I don't mean to ask you this highfalutin,
but yeah.
Something is presented to you as true as a child.
Yes.
There's no reason for you ever to doubt that. And that the heaviness of that truth can affect you for the rest of your life. I remember when I was in college, I made a board game for my family that I brought home for Thanksgiving. And it was called, cleverly, Familial Pursuits. And it was, each question was about something that had happened to our family. Like, name one of Hank's college roommates, or who was home at the night the barn burned down, or what does Chip always want for Thanksgiving dinner? And I'm telling you, it was unbelievably revealing, because everybody, I had 4 siblings and 2 parents, and everybody remembered everything differently. And they were all absolutely certain that their version was right.
Their truth. It wasn't yours, it was theirs, or you had yours. Yeah. And I thought that was something you tapped into in All This Could Be Yours, with such authenticity, because we do have recollections and memories that aren't always what everyone else has. I remember when my parents were divorcing, a waitress said to me, Dan, your mother has her truth and your father has his truth, and then there's the truth. And they don't remember it the same way, because it was how it affected them and what was left there. So now I'm going to share a little story with you, because I do this every now and then. So because it fits into this. So I interviewed an author whose name is Allison. We'll just leave it at that. And I had said to her over the weekend when I was reading her book, I had wanted to post on Facebook, Allison has thrilled me all weekend long. And she goes very white face and said, oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't do that, because my husband follows all of the things I'm tagged on Facebook. And she said, while he knows I know you and all that, it just wouldn't have gone over well. And so let's talk about the internet portion of All This Could Be Yours. How it's both a curse and a blessing.
That's such a great story. And you can imagine, I mean, one of the things that makes All This Could Be Yours have its propulsiveness, I think, is that people are doing what they think is the right thing, but it might be actually destructive. It might be actually untrue, and someone might mistake the point of it. So this misperception leads to people making decisions based on something that's not true. And that happens. That's exactly what happens in our lives. We can't know what somebody else is thinking. We can't know what somebody else meant. And we might not realize what they really meant, but yet we do something as a result of that. Does that make any sense?
It does.
You're like, what is she talking about? So
never.
The idea of, again, the vulnerability of an author, and especially of the vulnerability of an author on tour, and the sort of instant reaction that's available on the internet. So Tessa finds something in her hotel room, and she thinks, oh, I'll take care of this right away. I'll find out who this belongs to. It's a lost item in her room, in her hotel room. And she posts it. She posted on Facebook and Instagram. Anybody know who this belongs to? And people instantly decide, since her book, and this is so funny, Tessa's book is also called All This Could Be Yours. And so she posts this item, could this be yours? And some of the people on the internet decide that it's a PR tactic. It's a sales ploy. It's a promotional device. It's a gimmick, that she didn't really find something. Even her publicist emails her and says, "Oh, clever girl, you pretended you found something, so you could put up all this could be yours." And she says, "No, it's true. I did find the thing." And so half the people, or some amount of people, are helping her find the owner of this precious thing. And the other half of the people have decided that she's a gimmick, that she's a fake, that, she's just doing this for promotional reasons. And every single thing on the internet then for her, the story is always in the comments, isn't it? When you see
yes, it is
something, and then you see what the reactions are. And people are saying, "Did you see the cute guy at Tessa's signing? He seemed very interested in her." And someone else says, "She's happily married." And someone else says, "Ha ha, book tour, little does he know." And they're like, "No, Tessa's great." And so her whole life is being dissected and discussed in public, and she really has no control over that. And again, that's the double-edged sword. It's like, she loves this. I mean, her publisher loves her for a while. Her book is successful. This is what she always wanted. And yet what's happened is that she's opened the door to this animosity, to this venom, and to possibly secrets of her past being revealed. I mean, and I know there are authors who travel with bodyguards, who go to their book events with bodyguards, because this sort of parasocial relationship, when someone loves you so much, for instance, that an author so much, for instance, that they think they know them. And as a result of thinking they know them, then how easy is it for that author to disappoint them? And then when the author disappoints them without knowing that that's what they're doing, then suddenly, "I hate you, you're canceled, you're horrible, you're a bad person, I'll never read your books again." And you didn't do anything. So that tightrope of vulnerability is incredibly realistic in All This Could Be Yours. I mean, again, the responses I've had from authors are hilarious. Like, "I'm never going to book tour again. I'll never sign another book again. I'll except for best wishes." I loved it. And the thing that was such a surprise about this book is that it is a fast-paced, super high stakes cat and mouse chase with, as I said, with the author running for her life. It's a page turner, I hope.
Mm-hmm. It is.
But it also turned out to be sort of a love letter to readers and writers, and certainly independent bookstores and librarians, because even though I already knew it, writing this book took me into the inner workings of book tour. And I realized how incredibly important every single part of it is, how hard bookstore owners work, how wonderful, life-savingly wonderful librarians are, how valuable and valued readers are, and how writers learn that stories can change their lives. And it turned out to be, I think that's one of the reasons I was crying at the end. It turned out to be a very profound, for me, examination of this life that I lead and what it means, why it's important, and who makes this happen. And I'm still very moved when I think about it, because I think it opens the door to readers who might love going to book events, but don't see all the things that are going on behind the scenes, all the family pressures, all the publishing pressures, all the book sale pressures, all of the, you can't be 1 minute late, you can't miss a plane, you're worried every moment about whether anybody's going to show up at this event. And so I wanted to let readers and writers and booksellers and librarians know how much we appreciate this, how much we care about this. It's funny because almost every scene in All This Could Be Yours takes place in an airport or an airplane or a hotel or a bookstore or a library. And I love that for the setting, because these are the most important things in an author's life.
Well, it is, and it is sort of what you do. I mean, I think that any author knows that writing the book is a hard exercise. Selling the book is equally as hard because you've got to be invested in both of those aspects because it is a business. It isn't a hobby, it's a business, not if you want to really make a go of it.
And, in real life, in real life and in the book, Tessa's publicists are calling, Tessa's publisher is calling, how we're checking on the book sales, how many people were there, how did you do? Did they have enough books? Are you going to get there? You're essentially, as Tessa realized, is essentially a traveling salesman. And her family is at home with Tessa as the sole breadwinner. So no matter what she does, she can't stop. She can't fail. She cannot fail. The stakes are not only for her and her career, but for the livelihood of her family. So talk about pressure. There's a lot on
Right.
That's
That's why Hank never sits still. I love it. So again, the book is All This Could Be Yours. Every conversation with Hank Phillippi Ryan seems to go too quickly, but I appreciate your time. And I know this book is going to sell like hotcakes, just like all the rest of yours do. Thank you so much.
It's been marvelous to talk with you about this. This is one of the first times I've ever talked about the book. So it's incredibly exciting to me. Thank you. I'm
Thank
really
you very
excited
much.
about it.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.